Afternoon, good evening, and welcome to SMM Connect. Today's event, that's not what I meant. Versatility, a salesperson's guide to effective communication. This event is offered in partnership with Wilson Learning, and we have Michael Leinbach and David Yesford here today, your co-presenters. I'll turn things over to them in just a moment. My name is Sandy Masters. I'm out here in the Phoenix area of Arizona, where we're finally cooling down. You're welcome to send me a private chat during today's session if you need any help at all. We hope you will consider joining us on September 19th for Digital Transformation 2.0, an executive's guide to AI, chatbots, and the future of MarTech. Ooh, interesting. That's with Rachel Yeakley. And then on September 19th, that same day, we have Nolan Himes' PowerPoint charts that stand out. And on September 26th, making the business case for incentive travel. Ooh, I like that one. That's with Ira Ozer, Jason Masati, and Alan Schweier. You can find all of these events listed at smmconnect.com. Visit the calendar today and get registered for those. Be sure to come back on November 9th. We have Michael and David presenting a session entitled Increasing Win Rates and Profitability, 3 Keys to Greater Success. If you're on Twitter and want to get the latest events and white papers and free resources, connect at SMM Connect US. We would love to have you as part of our Twitter family. And if you are brand new here, you should know that you can subscribe for free digital download at salesandmarketing.com/subscribe. The SMM focus reports, these are topics that your counterparts are talking about, thinking about. So go ahead and get those free items and resources. We're forever grateful to our contributors and partners today. Wilson Learning, this event is in partnership with the Wilson Learning Worldwide. There's a hyperlink on the screen. I'll put that in the chat as well. Visit Wilson Learning today to learn more about their offerings. And it is my pleasure and privilege to welcome back to SMM Connect David and Michael. And David's going to start us off here and we'll get your cameras turned on. Go ahead and click the camera webcam icon at the top of the screen. And you should be able to get your webcam on. You want to click the webcam and then click the share button. There's Michael. Good to have you. And David should be there. All right. We are good to go. Welcome back.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Sandy. I appreciate it. That was a little bit more of an adventure to get the video on than I had anticipated, but I'm on now, and Michael and I are both on. But thanks, Sandy. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you to SMM Connect and to Gary Van Antwerp, so supportive and a great overall partner. Every time I do this, I try to keep track with the number of years that we've been doing this, and I think it's been 8 years actually that we've been partnering with SMM Connect and Gary and the whole team there. So very supportive, really helpful. I love this platform too of Adobe Connect. It really helps Michael and I focus on the participants. So welcome. And welcome to, that's not what I meant, Versatility, a salesperson's guide to effective communications. Customers have different expectations than how they prefer to work with salespeople. When a salesperson meets those expectations, the customer is comfortable. When the salesperson's approach is outside of those expectations, the customer is uncomfortable. Now, salespeople differ too, and salespeople are more comfortable working with some customers than with others. The challenge is, as we all know, you can't always choose the customers that we're selling to. And here's the bottom line: comfortable customers buy. And versatility, as Dr. Leinbach and I will discuss, sends a message to the customer that you're taking responsibility for the relationship to make it productive and in making an effort to do business in a way that's comfortable for the customer. Dr. Leinbach and I are co-authors of 2 books and numerous articles on the topic of versatility. Michael has done several research studies. We'll hear about one of those during our time today. And I've facilitated sessions for customers in each of our 30 years. Both of us have been with Wilson Learning for 30 years plus. This is fun for Michael. This particular session is really fun for Michael and me, primarily because we're different styles. And I'm not going to declare what style I am right now, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a hint for you to prepare. If you look at the behaviors, we're on camera, you can hear us, you can see us. Take a look at some of the behaviors that we exhibit over the course of our session today. And we'll ask you some questions and actually ask you to maybe identify what our styles are. And we hope ultimately that the different perspectives that we bring to what makes us comfortable, both Michael and I, will add interest and depth to this particular webinar. Please also feel free to join us in our conversation in our journey today. Put your questions and comments in the chat box. We'll be looking at those. We may be stopping and posing those questions. We may even put those questions inside of our overall presentation today. So let me pass this now over to Dr. Leinbach to get us started on That's Not What I Meant, Versatility, a Salesperson's Guide to Effective Communication. Michael?
Great. Thank you, David. And thank you, Sandy. And thank you all for being here for us today. We're really excited to talk to this because when we talk to salespeople after they've learned the skill of versatility, they often talk about it as their secret weapon. Their ability to adapt to meet customers' expectations for how they interact has been proven to have a big impact on their sales. And so what we want to do is really spend some time today helping you understand the concept of interpersonal versatility and the value it has for salespeople, really for anybody in interacting with other people. What we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about what versatility is, define it a little bit, and why it's critical. And then we're going to cover 3 keys to versatility and the 3 steps to being a more versatile person. And then we're going to share with you some of the results that we've had with one particular client on the impact of sales versatility or interpersonal versatility on a group of salespeople. The hope is that you're going to come out of this with the ability to be more productive and more effective in your interaction with customers and have a better relationship with your primary contacts with your customers. Now, a lot of people talk about versatility, communication versatility as kind of a personality thing, a nice to do. But the reality, it's a must do for organizations because it has real business impact on you as a salespeople or your organization. One, we know that people with higher interpersonal communication skills, higher versatility, advance faster in their organizations. They're just more successful in their careers. Salespeople with better interpersonal communication skills, better versatility, have higher sales revenue and higher profitability of those sales. And sales groups, sales organizations who train people in interpersonal versatility skills have on average a 53% increase in their sales, in the revenue they're generating. So clearly this has a big impact on a sales organization. In particular, it has a big impact on people, anybody who communicates with others, which is pretty much all of us. So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about what we mean by interpersonal versatility, or what we just call versatility. It's really the ability to adapt your behavior to meet the concerns and the expectations others have of you for the purpose of maintaining comfort. Now, comfort is important in the sales relationship because comfort equals trust. You say customers trust you more if they feel comfortable. Comfort equals openness. They're more likely to be open. So they're going to answer your tough questions, maybe the sensitive information you need to make a better offering to them, a better solution to their needs. And so comfort is critical, particularly to that discovery stage, but throughout the sales process in terms of making you more effective and having a better relationship with your customer. Now, when we talk about versatility, we talk about high versatility and low versatility. So let's lay out that a little bit in more detail. When we talk about low versatility, salespeople that do not show a lot of versatility skills, they tend to prefer certainty. They like things laid out. They know, they follow a sales process. Even if it's not going well, they're going to follow it in steps. Whereas high versatile salespeople, accept that there's going to be ambiguity to that relationship and are willing to move with the flow of that interaction and that relationship.
They also lower versatility, people that are lower versatility stick to a position. Here's what I believe, here's what I want, I'm going to stay there. Higher versatility, they get to a place where they're willing to negotiate. They can articulate the reason behind the position they might take, but then are willing to ultimately negotiate it to come up with a better conclusion around what the outcome would be.
And low versatile salespeople also tend to rely on their position power. I'm in charge, I'm the boss. When they're working with internal support people, I'm the salesperson. Um, in their relationship with others. Whereas high versatile people tend to emphasize more their personal power, what we call your social equity, or your social intelligence skills, the ability to form those relationships with other people.
And continuing on this theme and dealing with customers, they don't always follow a script. Sometimes things are different. There might be some tension or there might be something going on in the client organization. Lower versatility salespeople display consistent behavior no matter what's happening. They're going to do the same thing. They're going to react the same way no matter what's happening around them. Whereas higher versatility is demonstrated in flexible behavior, responding to what's going on around them, adjusting what their behavior might be to accept and understand the situation.
And finally, um, low versatile people tend to be single-minded. They stay on one topic, they one issue that's driving their performance. Whereas high versatile people can see all sides. They can see the customer side, they can see their internal support side, they look for all sides of that relationship. So when you look at salespeople effectiveness, do you want salespeople who try to create and prefer certainty, stick to positions, rely on their position for their power, and are single-minded? Or do you want salespeople who accept ambiguity, can negotiate effectively, emphasize their personal relationships as their source of power, be flexible, and look to all sides? Our research says that high versatile salespeople are more successful in their relationships, and bring more value to the interactions they have. So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about what are some of the universal truths about versatility. And one is that really we're all versatile to some degree. We might be higher or lower than other people, but we all have that capability of being versatile. Um, However, some people are naturally more versatile than others. Um, the other thing is that versatility is situational. Nobody can be highly versatile in every situation. So you have to pick and choose when you're going to be versatile. And more importantly, versatility is a skill. We can all learn to be versatile. We can all improve in our versatility through the right kinds of learning and experiences we have. And that's the key, is that versatility is a skill that you can learn. It's not a personality trait. It's a skill you can learn to be effective with other people. And the bottom line is really that the more versatile you are, the more comfortable your customers will be, and the greater your sales performance will be. And so with that, let's turn and talk a little bit more about how to become more versatile.
All right, the three steps that we talk about are very simple. It's about identify, reflect, and modify. And let's talk about these at a high level, and then we're going to talk about them individually. When you identify, what you want to do is look at the other person, and there's specific things we'll talk about in a minute about how you can identify their preferred way to communicate. That's the first step. I need to know what makes them comfortable. I need to know sort of how they perceive communication and effective communication. Then what I need to do is reflect. Reflect is the thing that's often missing in these kind of communication tools, and it really is about thinking about that other individual. What is it that they need? That customer's expectation for comfort for a productive relationship, and then ultimately modifying your behavior temporarily to ensure that you maximize the overall effectiveness. So the first one I want to talk about really is this identify, and again, it's the preferred way to communicate. It's really your social style. And when we talk about this, what we need to talk about is that the specific social style is focused on what are they in terms of the specific ways that they expressive driver, amiable, and analytical. We'll talk about that, what that is in a minute. But there's a couple premises before we get there that we really need to think about and talk about. The first premise is that we're all creatures of habit. We do what we do because that's what we do and that's how we like to do it. Simple. It just is. The second thing is we make judgments about other people and about other people's habits. We just, as humans, we do that. It doesn't matter. Everybody getting on this phone, I mean, on this webinar, for example, looking at Michael and I, made some judgments about us. It's just what happens. And the only way, however, to get around what will be pitfalls of judgment, right? Judgment is not necessarily a positive word. The way to get around those pitfalls is to focus on behavior because it allows us to avoid the judgment that comes along and begin to really think about what others need to work comfortably with us. Because at the end of the day, as we continue to say, people buy from people they're comfortable with. So let's talk about one of the axes, the way that we look at the behaviors. There's two axes that we look at from a behavioral kind of standpoint. The first one is assertiveness. Assertiveness is the way in which a person is perceived as attempting to influence the thoughts and actions of others.
And when we think about influencing others' actions, and how we try to control the situation, some people tend to be more what we call ask assertive. Um, what that means is they tend to be a little more indirect in how they approach it. They don't go after an issue directly, but it might be indirectly. When they make statements, they tend to be conditional. They say, well, maybe this is the case, or what do you think of this? They're conditional statements. They tend to ask questions more uh, rather than make statements. They are more deliberate in pace. They'll be potentially slower, more thoughtful in terms of how they're putting together words. Uh, they tend not to interrupt people very often, although they tend to get interrupted a few times. They
Sometimes.
um, sometimes they kind of value their personal space a little bit more, so they tend to lean back in their interactions with other people. Keeping that physical distance. And their volume tends to be a little quieter. They're a little softer in their voice.
When the other side of that from ask directed that Michael just went over is being tell directed. And as you might imagine, instead of the indirect approach from an ask directed, the approach is very direct. Statements are often declarative. The questions, there's fewer questions. And one of the things that's interesting about questions is sometimes when a question is asked, it's actually a statement, not a question. This is what tell directed do more often. Pace is rapid. They interrupt and they don't mind being interrupted. So there's many interruptions there. Body position is typically more leaning forward. Volume is usually a bit louder in terms of the way you look at things.
Now, independent of assertiveness is the characteristic of responsiveness, the behaviors of responsiveness in communication. And in interaction with people, some people tend to be more task-directed in their responsiveness. Others tend to be more people-directed. So when we talk about task-directed people, again, we're talking about communication behaviors. One is they tend to start with tasks and facts. That doesn't mean they will only talk tasks and facts, but that's where they feel comfortable starting. They tend to make fewer and smaller gestures. You don't see a lot of hand waving with task-directed responsive. Their tone tends to be a little more consistent, a little more monotone in their interactions. They tend not to share a lot of feelings. They might ask you how you think, but they're less likely to ask about how you feel. And their facial expressions, kind of like their gestures, are fewer and smaller in how they approach that interaction.
When you look at the people directed side, so you have task and then you have people on the responsiveness. People, the focus is really starting more with the relationships and feelings. And just as Michael pointed out, that it's not just tasks and facts with the task directed, it's not just relationships and feeling. The reality is both people directed and task directed, again, assuming they have more versatility, can go and a people directed person can really talk facts if they need to. So it's not that they just can't simply do that. It's just that this is what they start with. Gestures are typically more gestures, wider gestures. The tone is varied, often varied, and sometimes for no reason, it's just varied. Feelings, to share many of them. That includes stories and that kind of thing. If you know somebody that you talk to that always has a story or analogy for everything, that typically means that they're more in the people directed. And facial expressions, you can read their face pretty well. There's a lot of facial expressions on them. They're very dynamic in terms of how they use their face to communicate as well. So when you look at then the assertiveness as one axis, and you'll see that that goes in my way that I talk about it from east to west, right? You got ask directed and you got tell directed on the east to west axis, and you put that with the independent behavior around responsiveness for task and people, you now come up with the four quadrants that you can look at, and we can talk specifically about what do those mean, right? And so again, let's where we are right now is identify. We're trying to identify what makes somebody comfortable. We just went over what assertiveness and responsiveness means, which is how they like communication, the other person you're talking to. And when you put it in a quadrant, you can then identify someone who is ask directed or ask assertive, and task directed in terms of the responsiveness. We call those analyticals. Okay, so they like more task oriented kinds of things. They're much more ask from the perspective there. If you continue clockwise around this, you can look that a driver is someone that's still in the task oriented, but very much more tell assertive. They want to move quicker with things where the analytical wants to take a little bit more time, right? As we continue around, you have on the tell side, tell assertive, you have an expressive that has tell assertive and people responsive. All right. Again, that's somebody that because they're people in the tell, they're gonna talk a lot about different stories, and they're going to be much more um, grandiose in the kind of statements and the use of hands and facial gestures and so on. Finally, you have where are we going? I'm going backwards. Sorry. Amiable. So amiable is ask assertive, people responsive, right? So those are the four social styles. We'll talk more about the four social styles, but again, that's the first task we need to do in the identify, reflect, modify is to identify what makes the other person comfortable. And again, when we look at the whole context of versatility, it's the ability to adapt one's behavior to meet the concerns and expectations of others for the purpose of developing and maintaining customer comfort. That's what Michael talked about before when you define versatility. I like to, and we also like to do it a little bit more pragmatic way to say this. So the more I know about you, the more I know about me, the more I understand about you, the more it's my responsibility to manage the difference. And this is really important because once you recognize that you recognize that there is a different way that people think differently, people want different things in a productive relationships. That once you become aware of it, you either need to make the choice to take responsibility or ignore that. And what we're talking about is that your ability to be versatile is recognizing that you need to and can take responsibility for managing a productive relationship.
Right. And so identify is really the first step in terms of really developing interpersonal versatility. But it might be a good time to maybe remind people that if you have questions that come up, put them in chat. In fact, we already have one that we actually get very often from Yesenia, I believe that's how you'd pronounce your name, about DISC. How does social style and versatility relate to DISC? And that's a question we get very often from people. And DISC is a good tool, but DISC positions itself as a personality measure. It's really about understanding your personality, how in terms of helping you understand better how you work within your environment. Social style and versatility in particular is a communication skill model. It really talks about how other people perceive you, not how you perceive yourself. A lot of people use a self-assessment on DISC. That's how you assess yourself or see yourself. Social style is really about how others see you. And so there's a big difference in terms of how you can use social style to learn how to be versatile, which is the key. Knowing your style isn't going to change your life. Learning how to be versatile will.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's really just the first step. And so again, if you have questions, please put them into the chat. We'll respond to them as we get a chance. But let's talk about reflect, because once you've identified people, it now becomes your responsibility, as David mentioned, to reflect upon that person's needs and expectations in order to form a better relationship. So in our definition, it's really about using your information about somebody else's social style, your ability to recognize their style and understand your own style, to then reflect upon what they need in that situation. Because remember, we said earlier, versatility is situational. Just because they're a driver doesn't mean they always need the same thing in each situation. So reflect is about what their style is, what the situation is, so you can determine what they need from you to be more comfortable. So in this interaction, reflect is really kind of three basic steps. One, you describe the gap that exists. You know your own style, you've been able to figure out their style. So for example, the gap might be, I'm a driver, my client is an analytical. Okay, that tells you one thing, that's the first step. But the second is to consider each dimension to determine, well, what their needs are in that situation. So you might come to the conclusion that, well, we differ primarily on the dimension of assertiveness. You know, we're both tend to be more task oriented, but we differ in terms of ask versus tell oriented. And in that particular situation, what does that mean my customer needs of me? Well, it needs me to be more organized, maybe to be a little less direct in terms of how I respond to their questions, and or ask the questions, and to be a little more deliberate, allow them a little more space to interact. And so that's what we mean by reflect. You really kind of try to understand the situation, what their needs and expectations are. And it's important to keep in mind that you are not trying to become the other person's style. Versatility is about moving closer to them to make them more comfortable. And one of the great things you learn from talking with salespeople who go through this is that little changes have a big impact on a person's comfort in terms of how they're reacting to you. They don't expect you to mirror them, but they value your effort to try to move closer to them. Like, you know, I speak horrible Japanese, and we work a lot with Japanese people. And I speak horrible Japanese, but when I make the effort to speak Japanese, I make them more comfortable. And it's the same way with interpersonal versatility. And so when you think about what people expect just based on style, bringing in the situation later, you know, analyticals clearly are, you know, want predictability. They want time to think through their issues. You know, and they want an opportunity to really manage their pace, manage their interactions in that. Whereas a driver is more likely to want some degree of focus. They want to get to the bottom line. They like control. They value having control of situations within their organization, and they bring that to the pace. Expressives, though, really like energy. They like excitement. They want a flexible use of time. Just because you have an agenda doesn't mean you're supposed to stick to it. They value recognition in their relationships with you. They like it when you recognize their expertise and their contributions to everything. And amiables are really value openness in a relationship. They like times to consider relationships, and that when you're selling to them, it's not just their needs they're interested in, their needs, they're interested in all the needs of the people there that might be affected by whatever solution you're putting in place. And so when you consider, you know, not just what they are in terms of their style, but what that means in terms of the expectations, you're moving that much closer to being versatile in your interactions with them. And so in underlying that is based upon your understanding of their expectations for being comfortable in interactions, you're making some decisions, you're reflecting on how you might modify your behaviors to maximize the potential in that interaction, that relationship. And again, it's a temporary thing. You're not trying to become their style. You're doing it for the sake of helping them be more comfortable in the interaction. So in terms
Hey,
of,
hey, Michael.
yeah.
Hey, Michael, I'm gonna jump us back a little bit because I want to make a quick point here. So I'm gonna jump here, and to go back to this particular slide. Um, when I did the introduction and sort of described this, Michael, one of the things that I also then said was take a look at our behaviors, yours and mine, and let's see if we can have people identify what our style is, what they think our style is. Um, I love this particular slide because it does a couple things for me. It really tells me, again, from a very pragmatic thing, what I need to consider if I'm dealing with an analytical driver, expressive, amiable. There's very specific words that are there, not just respect or control or recognition or approval, which we often look at for those particular styles, but really sort of the other things that are there. But the question I have for the audience, I guess, is if you look at this, we did identify, now we're reflect. If you look at this, what style do you think that Michael is?
Yeah, so just put it in the
Just
chat.
just so just Michael. So Michael's a driver? Good. What else we got? Who
Anybody
thinks
else?
who thinks
A-
so we got
Analytical.
Yazani says analytical, Caesar says analytical, Adam says analytical. How many people see analytical? Cool. What is it? Let's stay on this for a minute. What behavior did you see Michael do in the first 30 minutes of this call that says he's analytical? No style.
Caesar, no, I have no style. Yeah.
No style. We're not talking about his
Yeah.
address
That's
or any
what
of
my
that kind
wife
of stuff.
talked
Come
about.
on, take it easy, man. There you go. So he's laid out.
He's
He
out
laid
on
out the track.
track. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. What else did you see? We'll get a couple more things here. So because he did a lot of the Michael did a lot of the research articulation, right? You want and he does want respect for that. That's really an important piece for Michael, and he should get the respect for that. The tonality, okay, cool, very good. Let's switch to let's keep those coming in if you want to, but you might get something wrong if you then say if the question is, what do you think my style is? And don't do the no style. We already did that one. That joke's already been done. Driver, amiable, driver, amiable. So we get back and forth between driver and amiable. Those it can't be more diametrically opposed, by the way.
Oh, we got an
Okay,
expressive.
we got an expressive. Okay, what behaviors are you seeing me do? Amiable to expressive. Okay. What behaviors are you seeing me do? Focused, control. Yeah, I guess I am wanting a little more control than usual, aren't I, Michael? I moved you all the way back from 2 slides
You
in.
did. I know.
Lots of questions, high energy.
And high energy.
Yeah, cool. Energy. All right. So, anticipating energy, big picture. Okay, cool. What and now, Michael, what's your style?
Well, my style is analytical, although um, the fact that several people said driver early on is that over the years, you know, social style is relatively stable, but it's not set in concrete. And so I am very clearly task directed in my
Very,
interactions with people.
very clear.
Um, but I'm a little less ask assertive, and I've kind of migrated over the years to be still analytical, but move closer to that line that differentiates ask from tell. So the people who said driver are probably not that far off in their
I
assessment.
don't know, Michael. We said a situational. I see his analytical a lot, but
Yeah.
when the last time Michael and I did this particular presentation together, we did a little bit more. We could do a little bit more physical clues that you could see because we're standing in front of the audience, and Michael did wear some really flashy socks.
Yeah.
Um, to, just to prove he could be versatile on that.
Yeah.
And by the way,
Yep.
I'm expressive, so that's my style. I do. Somebody said amiable to expressive. Actually, there are degrees of expressive, and I am more in the sort of the towards the amiable side of expressive is where I am, and I can see some of those particular behaviors. But the one thing too that you'll see is that both Michael and I are relatively versatile, so we can play around and go back and forth in terms of what we need to be at the specific situations that's there. And I said at the very beginning, this is fun for us, and the reason it's fun for us, for me, I sit back and I watch Michael be analytical, and I can appreciate analytical instead of getting frustrated with analytical. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do with identify, reflect, and modify. We're trying to give you the skills so that you don't look at somebody doing something and say, why did they do that? That's crazy, and get frustrated with it. It's sort of like, oh no, I understand why they did this. Let me help them let me help them in a productive relationship, in a productive conversation. And so that's ultimately what we're trying to do with modify. And you'll notice I am under a little bit of control because Michael jumped a couple slides back, and I'm going here because these are my slides, so I got to present my slides here in terms of what's going on. But so basically, again, we got to, based on everything that's going on, what I understand about what I recognize in terms of their social style, what I then in reflection see what they need. I need to decide how I modify my behaviors so that I can create that and take responsibility for that effective relationship. It's sort of, therefore I will, and specifically, what kind of changes am I going to make? When we think about style modification, Michael already said this, it's temporary. You're not changing yourself. That's never the intent. Your objective is to modify your behavior so that you can be sensitive and help the other person, in this case, the customer, be comfortable, right? So this is authentic change, not a I'm trying to change some way that's deceptive, not at all. It is a skill you can learn partly by becoming aware, and then again of some of these tools that we're talking about to allow you to take responsibility. But it does require effort and willingness. The reality is versatility cannot be faked, because you if you're feeling a certain way and you're trying to now talk differently to somebody, it's incongruent, and it does come across as incongruent. And again, I think in the other case of it, when we really talk about this, it does require effort and willingness, right? You got to want to do this. And this became really clear to me when I heard one of our facilitators probably 15, 20 years ago. I sat in a class where they were doing and talking about social styles, and they were talking about their choice to be versatile in the relationship with their spouse. And I could identify it right away. Sort of like, I'm stressed. I've got a lot of things going on. I just came home from work. I can't be versatile right now, right? And it's a choice. But normally, versatile person oftentimes, because of stress or other things, may just choose not to be versatile. So it is, again, effort and willingness. And here's the other thing: it's very hard to change your behavior on both the assertiveness and the responsiveness scale. It's just hard to do that. And so it does involve you changing one dimension at a time. Try not to do both, especially when you're learning it in the first place, just so that you can focus on what ultimately do I need to make to, to, to do to help them be comfortable. So when we look at style modification, we talked about assertiveness. Now, if I recognize that I need to be on the style on the axis of assertiveness, that's where I want to be versatile. That's where I want to do. So if I'm on the tell side, I want to ask more. What I might do is ask more questions, authentically ask questions, not like what I said before, which was a question that you know is a statement. Pause more often. Stop for a second. Take a breath. Listen. I got to tell you, as an expressive, one of the most effective things for me to really learn this particular thing in terms of pause real often, Michael talked about being in Japan. Sometimes when you're in Japan, you have to have translation of what you're saying, and it's not simultaneous. It's sort of you say something, they translate. So you have to pause. The first couple times I did that, I'm like, wow, there's a whole other world in here of how I can think about things in the conversation. And the pause actually really helps me sort of hear what's going on, assess what I need to do next, instead of just continue to react. Speak more softly, be more indirect if you can. If you're on the ask side, and to be versatile, you need to, the other person is more tell, you need to be more tell. What you want to do is make more statements, increase your pace, try and increase your volume. I know that's hard a lot of times for ask-oriented people, but then be more direct. Again, that's just some support and some help for what it is that you can do. Continuing with this theme, and I'll go through this relatively quickly. When the person is more on the people side, um, I'm sorry, when the person's more on the task side and you're on the people side, what you want to do is get to the task quickly. What you might want to do is again, come into the interaction with some specific notes about what specifically you want to do and how quickly you want to get that. Don't tell stories about your cat or your dog or your family and all that kind of stuff, not your how you're feeling about things. Unfortunately, with a lot of times that just derails the conversation. You want to limit the expression of your feelings. Kind of hold your gestures down a little bit, and again, share fewer feelings. So we want to limit the expression of them on your face and your hands, but also sharing that information. And then finally, if you're on the task side and you need to deal with someone who's more on the people side, what you want to do is focus more on a relationship. Ask them how they're doing. Authentically say, how are you doing? How are things going? Take time at the beginning of a meeting, for example, to do that before you get into the task. Increase your expressions of feelings. Make some more gestures. Share more feelings. Pretty simple, straightforward kind of stuff. You just need to stop, pause, and after you've now reflected, this is how you then move to the modify what it is that you do.
You know, one of the critical things is that since we're talking about salespeople, how you're versatile is different depending upon where you are in the sales process. So there's an overlap between the sales process and the level of versatility you're showing in an interaction. So how you modify is really going to depend upon where you are in that sales process. So let's talk about some examples of that. Um, for example, I'm an analytical.
Oh, hey,
You know,
Michael,
yeah,
I'm answering questions over here, and I'm supposed to ask you a question here. I know
well,
you
that's
don't
okay.
like
You're
interruptions.
expressive.
I, I know you
Talk
don't like
about.
interruptions, but I'm sorry to interrupt you. Michael, can I ask you a question? When you're dealing with salespeople in the sort of the find win kind of keep aspect of a sales process, what makes you comfortable? How do you like to deal with that?
Well, when you're talking about the during the find period, when they're first prospecting me, one, I want people to come to me with specific solutions, not broad ideas. If somebody gets on and says, hey, I can totally reform your business, it's like, thanks but no thanks. If they have a specific solution to a specific problem we might have, I'm interested. um, and also probably more important, don't tell me it's going to take a couple minutes and then take a half an hour. um, there have been times when I've actually said, "Hey, you told me it was going to be 15 minutes. It's been 20. Talk to you later," and hang up.
Well, and
So
Michael, the point about this one too, by the way, is that in a virtual environment that we're in now, in many cases, you get that actually becomes more frustrating for you when people take more time,
exactly, exactly.
right?
You
And you can
you're
limit it to
planning on
15-minute or 10-minute sections instead of a half hour because they're face to face with you.
exactly, exactly. Now during the win part, primary SEO, people asking you questions to discover your solutions. I really want a discussion that is more clearly focused on um, having thorough and unhurried discussion around points. One, I want to start with more fact-finding questions. Don't ask me, well, tell me your hopes and dreams at the very beginning. We'll get to that, but you know, it's more important that I get a chance to communicate, the facts of the situation we have. And I don't want to be hurried through that. If you know, if you ask a question, I'm going to pause. I'm going to think about it before I articulate the outcome. And then in the final step, you know, what we call the key part, the support, what happens after the sale is one. I want you to ask about my opinions and my ideas on how to make it better, or make the implementation better, and I want to be informed. The last thing you want to do is surprise me with a problem that you could have anticipated or knew about before I did. And so those are kind of things from an analytical perspective that I really value in that relationship. And the closer you to stay to that. But David, you're more on the expressive side. So tell me a little bit about what you value, particularly, in that first step, the find part.
In the fine part, for me, there's a lot of times that people come with, it feels like there's a standard value proposition that doesn't really take into account many things that I really care about. So if I agree to talk to you, so in the find kind of place, what I'm looking for is allow for an expression of what the big picture is. Tap into what my vision is. Bring me into the story of what it could be like. Working with you and why I need to share some of this information. Ask questions and then listen and then react to the questions. I want you to be part of the conversation. I don't want to be interviewed, if you know what I mean. When you continue on to the during the win stage of things, and so you've won the business, and so now we're working together. I want to get continual recognition that you understand the bigger need that I have, the vision I'm trying to go to. Well, I know that a lot of what needs to be talked about is the specifics of what's going to happen right now. Please always connect it to the bigger picture, because otherwise it's not that I don't I'll get distracted and I won't pay attention to you. I'll draw you back to that. If you tell me about something that we're going to do, I'm going to either ask the question or I'm going to check with you. This is how we get to the bigger picture, right? That's the bigger thing that I need. And I want you to be quick, but I don't want you to hurry. Quite frankly, I don't mind the detail, but goodness gracious, don't spend a whole bunch of time giving me the detail. I want more you to net it out a little bit more. And then as you move in the sales process again to the keep, um, again, be same to the beginning and during the find. I want to be part of the story. I want you to tell me how I'm part of the story, what it is that my vision is connected to what it is that we could do together. I want to be kept informed. I also want to be asked about, for my opinion about different things that might be additional things that the vendor might be able to offer. So that's where I would go. So some similar stuff, Michael, when I looked at this, and some very specific in terms of the different ways that we might want to manage the overall time. So this is really about expectations. This is really about how you modify and things and little tips that you can take into account in terms of how you're dealing with having to adjust your style. And so let's take a look at how we might compare analyticals and expressive. Now, if you remember the quadrants, analyticals in the upper left, expressives are in the lower right. So they're diametrically opposed. That's the reason that we did that. But so the first thing we need to look at is the primary asset is systematic. Analyticals are systematic. Expressives are much more motivating in the way they think about things. And again, I talked about Michael and I. Michael's analytical, I'm expressive. One of the things that I rely on Michael a lot is that systematic kind of thing. And Michael's many times come in and said, "Hey, we forgot a slide. You don't have this in here. How come? Where did that go? Where did we make that decision?" And that really helps me in the overall process. And that's why it's so important to appreciate the style and bring it into what you're trying to do. That makes a productive relationship versus get frustrated by, God, Mike, you're taking too much time on this thing because you're so systematic. Let's just go. That you can't do that. That doesn't work. You can see that there's other sort of measures of personal value is about respect. They need to analyticals want to sort of make more time to describe. They want to you want to let them save face. But from an expressive standpoint, the key operative here is you want to let them save effort. Again, they want collaborating, they want interesting, they want recognition, but the main thing is help them save effort. That's really what it is. Expressives are looking for. If we look at the driver and amiable in comparison, again, driver is much more controlling. That's what they want. There's a huge value to the control they want, and how they think about and see things is really valuable. And the analytical, if you think about a team that has all these styles, the supportive is a wonderful, tremendous skill and sort of behavior to have inside a team, because it does build much more cohesive team. Again, in the context of other things that you might focus on, driver, you want to make sure that again everything's efficient. You want to make sure there's options, but you don't want to have with the expressive. I'm sorry, with the driver. You don't want to give them 7 options. You want to give them 1 option. Here's what we can do. Here's an option. More than 1 option is frustrating to a driver, because they've got to make a choice. They rely on you for some of your expertise. And you want to follow up with the driver around showing them results. And then the amiable side, again, they're cooperative. You want assurances to provide there. They're really good at supporting the relationships and feelings. But the thing you want to follow up with an amiable with, from a sales perspective, is attention.
Great. You know, we've talked about how social style and particularly versatility has a real business impact. And so we wanted to share with you a little bit of data about one study we did with an organization that proved the impact of training salespeople how to be more versatile. Now, I won't go into too many details here because we'll take up a lot of time. We have a
And I
full
want to save
report
some
if you
time
want
for
to see that.
questions too, Michael.
Definitely want to save time for questions. But this was an organization, it was a pharmaceutical company that had a line of nutritional supplements, but they were hospital based. So these were, they sold into hospitals, doctors, nurses, other care providers within a hospital, for people with medical conditions that require different kinds of nutritional supplements. There are two groups. One was a infant formula, infant nutrition. One was a general nutrition. So these are babies maybe born with PKU or gastrointestinal problems or heart problems who need a specific kind of nutrition. And so these salespeople were going into hospitals, convincing doctors about the value of their supplements. And they were trying to really grow their market in a meaningful way. They were US based, they were moving into Europe. And one of the great things about why we like to talk about this study is they allowed us to train half of their salespeople and take a matched sample of salespeople that were a control group. So we had a group of people that are trained, a group of people that are not trained, and we're able to compare the results between those two, what we call a test or a train versus control group. And we're able to collect actual performance data over about a 6-month period. So we had a pre-measure 6 months before the training and a post-measure 6 months after the training. And that is kind of the ideal environment to show that, in fact, the training had a huge impact. So this is the nutritional data, a little bit of the data from the infant nutritional group of salespeople. And the number of trials was basically their measure of how many doctors prescribed um, their their formula for the infants in their hospital. Or and also the second measure was the percentage of their targets. Each salesperson had a target for how many they gave out, and we compared the train and control group. And you can see in both cases, they both went up, both the trained and control went up, because they were really trying to penetrate the market. But the train group significantly went up higher, um, you know, 20% versus 30% in terms of number, 30% versus 15% in terms of the percentage of their target going up. So clear indication, these are significantly different results for that organization, proving that in fact, beyond any kind of reasonable doubt, the training had a positive impact on those outcomes. This was the general nutrition, so this was adults or non-infant nutrition, and they had provided 3 measures. One was the dollar value of the sales they made, the percentage of their previous year's sales, and this is kind of a quota measurement, and then the number of units that were sold within. And again, on all 3 measures, there were significant differences between the percent of change for the train group versus the control group. So clear indication that over time, pre compared to post training, and the difference between train and control group significantly showed the impact of the training on these salespeople. And kind of in summary, and again, we can send you a report with more detail. The infant nutrition group increased their results 11% more than the control group, resulting in about $1.2 million for the group as a whole in terms of differences in revenue they generated. For the general nutrition, about an 8% increase, resulting in about $300,000. And then this was a small group, so that was a meaningful result for them in terms of the more information, the more revenue they generated for their organization. So really valuable study that really proves that the power of versatility, that secret weapon of improving sales performance, particularly in this environment.
That's significant, Michael. Now, before I go to what we need to do, I want to answer a couple of these questions. I started doing text writing some of these in the chat box, and I think they need a little bit more answers, but a better answer. Susan asked the question: "Tell people want tell, so shouldn't you be more ask when you interact with tell people?" The reality, I'll just tell you a quick little story as I would as an expressive. I remember meeting one of my new sales managers in China, and we were sitting there having coffee, and I just met the guy. He was clearly an expressive, so he's on the tell side as well. And we were just having a great old conversation. And I just stopped him for a second. I said, "Listen, I got to tell you something. You're what we call expressive. I'm expressive. What that means is I'm going to interrupt you, you're going to interrupt me, and neither one of us is going to care." And we then continued. So it again in that context, you don't necessarily want to acquiesce to an ask place and let a tell person drive you. In fact, the tell person is gonna appreciate that you can still stay there and make them comfortable. They want to be in that kind of conversation. In fact, the tell person, if you're a tell person, those are part of the 25% of the people that you often get along best with, right? So it works that way. Michael, I want to send a question to you that Bobby asked the thing. So social style is also situational. We talked about versatility being situational, and then we were talking about how that might change over in different situations and all that kind of stuff. And social styles might react differently. Social styles is actually more consistent, obviously, than versatility. That's something how you adjust your behavior. But just a quick thing about social styles being more um, permanent.
Right, and that's that I saw that question earlier, and I thought it was a great question to ask because you know while versatility is situational, you choose to be versatile or not. With social style, um, it's not a personality measure. Like DISC is a personality measure, social style is a behavioral measure, and as a result, it's you know it will change a little bit over time. You live your life, you have different experiences, you become a slightly different person. Usually, that doesn't mean changing your style completely, but it may move a little bit on those continua of assertiveness and responsiveness. I think the thing that people often get confused by that is they say, isn't being an expressive salesperson better than being an analytical salesperson? And the
Not
reality is the
necessarily.
data says no.
Yeah.
Every style can be successful in any kind of career. So, there's, can you change your behavior to change your style? Maybe, but there's no value in doing that. It's really
Yeah.
recognizing what you do and what they need and being able to diagnose or determine their style so that you can be versatile with them and versatile in the right situation in the right way. But a great question,
Exactly.
Bob.
Yeah, good
Yeah.
question. And the other thing is too, there's a couple questions in here. C. Bedford and Jim in Inzer, I think, was talking about identifying the challenges of today in the environment. One is the challenge of I adjust my style to make them comfortable. Now they expect me to do that all the time. Well, yeah, of course they do. And that's actually that's part of the deal that you need to do that. Jim's talking about across a phone or these kind of interactions across a virtual platform. The best you can do, Jim, is to look at again, really force yourself to look at the behaviors and identify what's there. My guess is if you think about Michael and me, and you think about the first 5 minutes of this conversation that we had with you today, that we could go back and say, yeah, actually, I could see some of those behaviors. Social styles and the behaviors that you're looking at, and the style and the assertiveness and responsiveness, give you a clue of what to look for, and then what you're doing is trying to validate that or find things that don't validate what you assume was a responsiveness or assertiveness kind of a thing. And it may be harder on the phone, but I bet you that you're going to find once you begin to pay attention to that, it makes things a little bit easier. I think we got all the questions here. If there's other ones that we need to, please let us know. But I want to go and just do a last couple things. Here's what you need to do as a wrap up of what it is that we talked about. Choose to be versatile. We said it's a skill. We said it's situational. Choose to be versatile. It means you're willing to take responsibility for a productive relationship and makes a huge difference from a business side that Michael just showed and we talked about. Use those three strategies. It's really simple: identify, reflect, and modify. And it's a simple, straightforward kind of a process that you can look at. Remember, reflect is really, really important because that's where you get the empathy part of it. And remember again that people love to buy, they hate to be sold, and They buy from people from whom they're comfortable with. I know there's we're going to switch to another screen where you might ask the question about what's your most important takeaway. We'd love to hear you talk about that, any important takeaway that you have in the last minute or so. And as you're doing that, a couple things that I want to do. First of all, you saw Kashika, sorry, put in a link to a paper that talks about another study that we did with another client that we had, again, showing the business impact. So take a look at that. I want to thank Michael. Thank you so much for the time, the energy, and the partnership in doing this particular session. Sandy, really appreciate everything that you've done. SMM Connect, Gary Van Antwerp, so valuable for us in helping us focus on all of you guys out there. And I think that is all I want to say. Michael, last words for you. Thank you,
Just
participants, for
thank you
everybody that
for
showed
all
up.
for being here. It was a great audience.
Yeah.
Sandy, perfect session. Great. Thanks for your help.
Yep.
I want to thank you for delivering this information. I mean, it's amazing how you gave specifics about the behaviors that you can exhibit to be versatile with someone that has a particular style, and that's something that you don't see all the time. So appreciate you sharing your time and talents with our audience. I did put in the pod there that says what's the best or most useful idea you learned today. Go ahead and type into that. You can continue to type into the chat as well. We want to thank Wilson Learning today, and after I stop the recording, I'll invite you, if you do have a burning question, raise your hand. I know David and Michael will stay a minute or two
Sure.
later to answer your question on mic. So thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Join us again for more webinars at SMM Connect, and have a great week. Thanks, everyone.